I have been watching a lot of science fiction lately, and there is something that really gets under my skin when I see these glossy animations of starships gliding effortlessly between star systems, crew members chatting over coffee, arriving at some distant world like they just took a bus across town. It is a beautiful picture. It is also, and I say this with complete honesty, completely disconnected from what the numbers actually tell us. Now, I am not going to sit here and tell you that dreaming is bad. Dreaming is wonderful. But there is something more important than dreaming, and that is reckoning. That is sitting down with a piece of paper and asking the universe directly, face to face, what it is actually going to cost to do this thing. And when you do that, the universe answers you very plainly, and what it says is not encouraging. Let me start with a picture to get the scale of this problem into your head, because the numbers alone do not hit you in the gut the way they should. Imagine you are a microbe, a tiny, almost impossibly small organism living on a single grain of sand, not a beach, a single grain of sand sitting in the middle of an enormous, completely empty, sun-baked desert. Everything you have ever known, your entire civilization, your entire history, every experiment you have ever run, every question you have ever asked, it all happened on that one grain of sand. Now, somewhere, very far away, so far that the light from it takes over 4 years to reach you, there is another grain of sand. Between you and that grain of sand is nothing. No water, no shelter, no air, just pure, featureless desert in every direction, for a distance so vast that if you walked continuously, day and night, without stopping, it would take you not years, not centuries, but millions of years to cross it. And the question is, can you build a machine small enough to carry a few of your microbe companions across that desert and deliver them alive to the other grain of sand? That is the problem of interstellar travel. That is not poetry. That is geometry. And geometry is where we have to start. The nearest star to our own sun is a small red dwarf called Proxima Centauri, sitting about 4.24 light-years away. Now, a light-year sounds like a unit of time, and people always get confused by that. It is not time, it is distance. It is the distance that light, traveling at roughly 300,000 kilometers per second, covers in an entire year. 1 light-year is about 9.5 trillion kilometers. 4.24 light-years is about 40 trillion kilometers. That is 40 followed by 12 zeros. That is not a number your brain is built to comprehend from everyday experience. You have to force yourself to sit with it. Our fastest spacecraft right now, the Voyager probes, move at about 17 kilometers per second. At that speed, reaching Proxima Centauri would take roughly 75,000 years. So the first thing everyone agrees on is that you cannot do it at our current speeds. You need to go much faster. And this is where the first wall of physics comes down on you like a mountain. To cross 40 trillion kilometers in any time frame that a human being would consider reasonable, say a few decades, you need to travel at a significant fraction of the speed of light. We are talking at least 10%, ideally 20 or 30%. And now you have to ask, how much energy does it take to push a spacecraft to those speeds? This is where the rocket equation comes in. The rocket equation was worked out by a Russian schoolteacher named Konstantin Tsiolkovsky at the end of the 19th century, and it is one of the most brutally honest equations in all of engineering. What it tells you is that the amount of propellant you need grows exponentially with the velocity you want to achieve. Think about what that means. If you want to go twice as fast, you do not need twice as much fuel. You need vastly, absurdly, grotesquely more fuel. And here is the part that turns the whole enterprise into a mathematical monster. The fuel has mass. The fuel has to be accelerated along with the ship, which means you need more fuel to accelerate the fuel, which means you need even more fuel to accelerate that fuel. The equation eats itself. It spirals into absurdity. Let us put some numbers on this. Suppose you want to send a spacecraft with a payload of 1,000 kilograms, roughly the mass of a small car, to Proxima Centauri at 20% the speed of light. If you are using a chemical rocket, the best exhaust velocity you can physically achieve, the mass ratio of fuel to payload is not 10 to 1. It is not 100 to 1. It is so astronomically large that the number becomes meaningless. You would need more matter than exists in the observable universe just to push a car to 20% light speed with chemical propulsion. You might say, fine, what about nuclear propulsion? Nuclear rockets can have much higher exhaust velocities. That helps. It genuinely does. But the rocket equation is relentless. Even with the best nuclear fission or fusion propulsion we can theoretically design, the fuel requirements remain at levels that are staggering. We are talking about needing a ship that is overwhelmingly, preposterously, almost entirely fuel. And that fuel has to be manufactured, contained, and controlled across decades of travel through deep space. And I want to be precise about the energy numbers, because they are jaw-dropping. To accelerate a payload of 1,000 kilograms to 20% the speed of light, you need on the order of 10 to the power of 20 joules of energy. The entire world, all of humanity, all our power plants, all our coal and oil and nuclear reactors combined produces on the order of 6 times 10 to the power of 20 joules per year. So, you need roughly 1/6 of the entire annual energy output of human civilization just to accelerate one small car to the speed you would need. And that is just the outbound acceleration. You have to decelerate at the other end too, which costs the same again. Now let us talk about the second wall, and this one is sneaky because people always think of space as empty. Space is not empty. The interstellar medium, the stuff between the stars, is filled with hydrogen atoms drifting at very low densities, maybe 1 atom per cubic centimeter on average. There are also microscopic dust grains, tiny frozen particles of carbon and silicate compounds scattered throughout the void. At low speeds, this does not matter. A spacecraft puttering through the solar neighborhood at a few kilometers per second would barely notice this material. But at 20% the speed of light, everything changes, and it changes violently. At that speed, every hydrogen atom your spacecraft plows into hits the forward surface with an energy comparable to a high-energy cosmic ray. You are essentially flying through continuous, invisible radiation bombardment. The particles that seemed irrelevant at low speeds become a relentless sandblasting force, sputtering away the material of your heat shield, eroding your structure atom by atom, and the dust grains. A single microscopic dust grain, something so small you cannot see it with the naked eye, has a mass of perhaps a millionth of a gram. At 20% the speed of light, the kinetic energy of that collision is enormous. The impact of a single dust grain on your spacecraft at those speeds releases energy comparable to a small explosive. If a grain of that size hits a critical component, the ship is finished. So here is the problem in its full, terrible clarity. The faster you go to save time on a 40 trillion kilometer journey, the more violently the interstellar medium tries to destroy your vehicle. Speed is not just your friend on this trip. Speed is also your enemy. Every order of magnitude you add to your velocity multiplies the destructive force of each particle impact. You want to go faster to survive the journey in a reasonable time. The universe responds by hitting you harder. This is not a problem you can engineer your way around easily. It is built into the numbers. You can imagine putting a thick shield on the front of the spacecraft. People have proposed this seriously. A massive block of material that absorbs, impacts, and erodes slowly enough to protect the payload behind it. That could work, but the shield has mass that must be accelerated, which brings you right back to the rocket equation spiral. Every gram of shielding you add to survive the interstellar medium requires more fuel, which requires more fuel, which makes the whole enterprise more absurd. And then there is the third wall, the biological one, because we keep talking about machines, but the original premise was sending human beings. Human bodies evolved under a very specific set of conditions. We evolved in a biosphere wrapped in a magnetic field, and an atmosphere thick enough to absorb most of the high-energy radiation streaming in from the cosmos. Our cells, our DNA, our nervous systems, they are all calibrated for this protected environment. Outside that protection, high-energy galactic cosmic rays, which are protons and heavier nuclei accelerated to near light speed by supernova explosions and other violent events in the galaxy, penetrate right through spacecraft walls, right through your body, smashing through cells and DNA strands with nothing you can do to stop them. Unlike the particles in your medical X-ray machine, these particles are so energetic that the shielding required to stop them is not just thick, it is on the scale of meters of solid lead or water. You cannot carry that kind of shielding on a spacecraft and still move at any meaningful speed. Prolonged exposure to this radiation causes DNA damage that accumulates faster than the body can repair it. Cancer rates climb. Central nervous system function degrades. Eyes develop cataracts. Cardiovascular systems are damaged. And we are talking about exposures over years, not months. Even setting aside the radiation, the timescales involved in interstellar travel pose a fundamental problem for biological organisms. Even at 20% the speed of light, the journey to Proxima Centauri takes over 20 years one way. That is 20 years in a sealed environment, with no resupply, no outside assistance, no room for significant equipment failure. Human psychology, human physiology, the closed-loop life support systems required to keep people alive, all of these have to work perfectly, without any serious failure, for 2 decades at minimum. We have never kept a closed life support system running flawlessly for more than a few months. The International Space Station is kept alive by continuous resupply missions from Earth. Remove the supply chain, remove the emergency rescue option, and the fragility of biological systems in space becomes immediately apparent. Now, I want to be clear about something. I am not telling you these things to crush enthusiasm for science or for space exploration. The planets in our own solar system are extraordinary, and we should go to them. Mars is a fascinating place. The moons of Jupiter and Saturn hold scientific mysteries that are deeply worth investigating. Robotic exploration of the broader galaxy is not obviously impossible over very long timescales. I am not saying the cosmos is entirely closed to us. What I am saying is that when you sit down with the actual numbers, with the rocket equation and the kinetic energy of dust impacts and the biology of radiation exposure, the picture that emerges is not the one painted by science fiction. The picture that emerges is one of a universe that is, to a first approximation, simply too large for biological creatures to traverse. And here is what I find genuinely profound about that. Not depressing, profound, because the difficulty of leaving tells you something extraordinary about where you are. The fact that this planet, this particular grain of sand in the cosmic desert, happens to sit inside a protective magnetic field, bathed in the right amount of light from a stable star, wrapped in an atmosphere dense enough to block the lethal radiation of open space, supplied with liquid water and complex chemistry, and a temperature range in which proteins can fold and cells can divide, this is not something you should take for granted. This is a staggeringly specific set of physical conditions that the universe does not hand out casually. The very laws of physics that make interstellar travel so brutally difficult are also the laws that tell you how rare and improbably precise the conditions for your existence actually are. You are sitting inside the one structure in the interstellar void that is genuinely habitable, protected by layers of physics that took billions of years to assemble into their current form. The honest scientific conclusion is not that we need better spaceships. The honest scientific conclusion is that the machinery of this planet, the physical system we already inhabit, is something whose value the universe itself is communicating to us through the sheer impossibility of replacing it. The numbers do not lie. The universe is under no obligation to be convenient. And the scale of the obstacle is, in itself, one of the most important pieces of data the cosmos has given us about the place we already stand.